The day I buried my husband, it felt like more than just his physical body was leaving with him. It wasn't just the crushing weight of grief that suffocated me, but a cold dread settled in my chest, a suspicion weaving its way among the flowers and hushed whispers. While everyone else was weeping, I witnessed something that turned my blood to ice. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, leaned over the casket, and while pretending to adjust the lapel of Elijah's suit, she subtly slipped a small object into the inside pocket. Her hand trembled for the briefest of moments. No one else seemed to notice, but I did. For a moment I questioned what I had seen. I thought the pain was playing tricks on me, that perhaps it was just a tissue or a piece of metal. But no, the look on Vanessa's face was too deliberate, too cold, and the way she glanced at my son Marcus afterward was that of someone who had successfully completed a task. I stood frozen in place. The pastor continued with the service. The incense rose in pale spirals, and the words about eternal rest rang hollow. All I could focus on was that brief secretive movement, that hand concealing something on the body of the man I had shared 40 years of my life with. When the ceremony concluded and everyone moved to the reception hall for coffee and condolences, I lingered behind, alone in front of the casket. The silence was so profound I could hear the creaking of the wood. The scent of melting wax made me feel dizzy. Then I took a step forward, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid someone might hear it. I leaned over Elijah. He appeared so still, so impeccable in his navy suit. His face resembled that of a man at peace, but I knew, as only a wife can know, that his stillness wasn't serenity. It was a mystery. I slid my trembling hand into the jacket pocket. My fingers brushed against something hard and rectangular. I carefully pulled it out. It was a precisely folded white envelope, and on it in handwriting was my name, Celeste. The world seemed to stop. My breath caught in my throat. I tucked it into my purse, glancing around to make sure no one had seen me, and pretended to adjust my black scarf. A few minutes later they closed the coffin, and with the dull thud of the hammer on the lid, I knew the Real burial was only just beginning. On the drive back home the highway seemed to stretch on forever. The car moved through the evening mist, and every thought was like a drumbeat in my head. What had Elijah intended with that envelope? And why had Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, been the one to place it there? Was it a message from him or a trap set by her? I didn't want to open it yet. I clutched it against my chest as if it contained the voice of a dead man. When I arrived, I placed my purse on the dining room table. The lights were off and the house was silent. Everything smelled of wilting flowers and emptiness. I sat in the chair where Elijah used to read the newspaper, and only then did I open the envelope. Inside was a sheet of paper folded in thirds and a small dark metal key. The letter was short, written in my husband's firm handwriting. Celeste, if you are reading this, it means I couldn't do it in person. What you believed was yours never was. Trust no one. Sometimes the closest love is the one that wounds the deepest. I read those lines over and over, as if I could find the soul they had stolen from me hidden between the words. The paper smelled of wax and earth, and the key gleamed with a dull sheen, as if guarding centuries of silence. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow in the house seemed different. Every corner carried a weight it hadn't before. The wind banged against the windows and memories crept in with it. Elijah's laugh, the scent of his tobacco, his youthful promises. I had loved him with every part of me, and yet now I doubted everything. When the clock struck 3 o'clock in the morning, I got up. I couldn't bear the uncertainty any longer. I took the key, placed it on the table, and examined it under the lamp's light. It was old, with the number 47 etched on the side. It looked like a safety deposit box key. And then I remembered weeks before he passed, Elijah had said something odd. If anything happens to me, don't look for answers at home. At the time I thought he was just rambling in his fever. But now those words stabbed me like a knife. He knew something, and Vanessa did too. The next morning my son Marcus called me. "Mom, how are you holding up?" he asked. "Fine, son. As best as can be expected," I replied. "Vanessa and I are coming over later. We want to talk to you." His tone was kind, but there was an unease in his voice that I couldn't quite place. "Of course," I replied. "I'll wait for you." I hung up and my hands closed around the key. I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. For the first time since all this began, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt alert. And although I still didn't know what that key unlocked, I knew I wasn't ready to share it with anyone. Because sometimes when you delve into the past, what you unearth can be far more terrifying than the silence itself. And I was about to open a door that would forever alter my family's history. The morning light filtered through the window, gray, as if the sky itself doubted what it should illuminate. That morning, the silence in the house carried a new weight. The empty space beside the bed, the gap in the closet where his coat used to hang, the lingering scent of cologne in the air. Everything was a cruel reminder that Elijah was gone. And yet, I sensed his presence everywhere. In the clock that marked his rhythm of life, in the books he had underlined, in the coffee cups that still held his fingerprints. But most of all, I felt his absence wrapped in questions. That key, that letter, that sentence written in his hand. What you believed was yours never was. I sat down at the dining room table where the morning light fell directly onto the paper. I read it again. Each word seemed heavier than the last. The cold metal of the key burned between my fingers. The etched number 47 spun in my head like an impossible riddle. Mid-morning, Marcus and Vanessa arrived. The sound of the doorbell startled me. Only 2 days had passed since the funeral, but their visit brought me no comfort, only anxiety. Vanessa was the first to enter. She wore a fitted black dress, her hair meticulously pinned up, her face serene, almost too serene. She kissed my cheek with a quick, almost formal gesture. "How are you feeling, Celeste?" she asked in a soft voice. "Tired," I replied, "but calm." Marcus hugged me without saying a word. I felt him tense, his muscles rigid, his gaze avoiding mine. "We just wanted to see how you were doing," Vanessa added. "Elijah loved you very much." Her words were technically correct, but they felt hollow, and her eyes, as she spoke them, revealed not sadness, but something harder to define, caution. We sat in the living room. The clock ticked insistently. Marcus took my hand. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about the will." "The will?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Yes, Dad left some things in your name, but—" He glanced sideways at Vanessa. "There are certain procedures we need to review." "Procedures?" I repeated, tasting the word as if it were poison. Vanessa intervened, smiling with a courtesy that stung more than a slap. "We don't want you to worry about a thing. We just want to help you organize the paperwork." "I appreciate that," I said, pretending gratitude. Elijah was always very organized. "I'm sure everything is in order." I saw her study me for an instant, as if trying to read my mind. Then I understood. She knew that I knew something, and this silent game between us had begun. When they left, I closed the door and rested my forehead against the wood. My heart was pounding as if trying to warn me that something was coming. I went up to the bedroom and opened the drawer where I had stored the letter. I took out the key and looked at it again. The number 47 wasn't for the house, nor for any box of Elijah's that I knew of at home, but there was a bank. The same one where he had worked for years, that had safety deposit boxes numbered that way. I decided to go the next day. I felt nervous but also strangely alive. After days of mourning and silence, I finally had a purpose. The next morning I put on a gray coat, pinned up my hair and took the city bus. The ride was long and noisy. I looked out the window at the streets, which seemed different, as if the world had distanced itself from me a little since Elijah passed. When I arrived at the bank, the security guard at the entrance recognized me right away. "Good morning, Miss Thacker." "I am so sorry about Mr. Thacker," he said respectfully. "Thank you, son. I need to inquire about a safety deposit box." I went to the counter. The employee checked the records. "Do you have the key and the authorization document?" I took the key from my purse. The woman took it, looked at it, and raised an eyebrow. "Box number 47 in the name of Elijah Thacker," she said. She asked for my ID, and after a few minutes, she led me to a private room. My heart was pounding in my chest. Every step along that carpeted hallway seemed like an echo of my own breath. The vault door opened with a metallic sound, and the employee left me alone. I inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting only for my hand. The box slid out. It was small, discreet. Inside was a brown folder, a sealed envelope, and a black and white photograph. I picked up the photo first. Elijah was in it, younger, his arm around a woman who wasn't me. She had large eyes, a serene smile, and a familiar look that disoriented me. I didn't know who she was, but something about her face felt achingly familiar. I opened the envelope. Inside was a different will from the one Marcus had shown me the day before. The document was dated 1 month before his death. I read each line slowly, and my breath grew shorter with every word. I, Elijah Thacker, leave Serena Harper as the primary beneficiary of my assets. Serena Harper. That name meant nothing to our family or our history, or so I thought. At the bottom, the signature was authentic, without crossouts, without a doubt. Elijah had done it willingly. I felt a mixture of anger and confusion. Who was this woman? A mistress? A long-lost relative, a business partner? And above all, why had Vanessa put the key in the casket? I left the bank with shaky legs, put the papers in my purse, and walked aimlessly through the streets. The city went about its business, indifferent to the storm brewing inside me. The noise of the cars, the voices of the people, the wind in the trees, everything seemed distant. Arriving home, I locked the door and sank onto the sofa. I looked at the photo again. That woman, that smile, that familiar look. And then I saw it. In the background of the photo, almost imperceptible, was a little girl about 3 years old, with light eyes and hair just like Vanessa's. A choked gasp escaped me. The photo slipped from my hands and fell to the floor. Because for the first time in my life I was afraid of my own family. I slept with the photograph under my pillow as if I feared it would vanish while I slept. Yet sleep evaded me. The image of that unknown woman, Serena Harper, and the light-eyed girl haunted me with every blink. There was something in her gaze, in the way Elijah held her shoulder, that didn't resemble the gesture of a man with a lover. It was a more tender, more intimate, more guilty gesture. Dawn arrived without warning. I got up before the alarm rang, made coffee, and sat down at the table where the letter still lay. The coffee steam rose slowly, as if the air itself knew that this day would change something within me. I spread the documents on the tablecloth. The will, the photo, the letter. Elijah's signature was genuine, and the date undeniable, 1 month before his death. If he had left everything to that woman, why had he never told me? And why did my daughter-in-law Vanessa have the key to that box? I decided to go to Elijah's lawyer's office, Attorney Lawson. I had known him for years. He was the one who helped us buy the house and formalize the original will, the one where everything was left to me and Marcus. When I arrived, the lawyer greeted me with a courtesy tinged with discomfort. "Miss Thacker, my condolences again. Elijah was a great man." "He was," I replied in barely a whisper. "I need to speak to you about his will." "Of course, I have a copy here." He opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a green folder. "It says here that his assets are to be divided between you and your son in equal shares." "And what about this one?" I asked, placing the document I had taken from the bank onto his desk. The man adjusted his glasses and read it in silence. His face changed. "I haven't seen this before. Do you recognize the signature?" "Yes," he said after a few seconds. "It's your husband's without a doubt. But what? This document was never filed here." I knew in that instant that someone had been pulling strings. Elijah had made this will in secret, and someone else, likely Vanessa, had wanted to ensure I never found it. "Attorney Lawson, did you know a woman named Serena Harper?" I asked. The man hesitated. "The name rings a bell, but I can't place it. Maybe from my husband's past." "Could be. Elijah had many contacts, although that name." He frowned. "Wait, let me check something." He checked an old filing cabinet, one covered in dust and yellowed labels. He pulled out a folder. "Here it is. More than 30 years ago, Elijah signed a child support agreement in the name of Serena Harper. A chill ran through me. Child support? For whom? For a minor. That woman's daughter. The silence grew thick. My heart began to pound fiercely. A daughter? I asked, barely breathing. Yes, but the girl's name is crossed out. Seems it was intentionally erased. My eyes welled with tears. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband, the man who had slept beside me for 40 years, had a daughter with another woman and kept it from me his whole life. I left the office staggering as if each step weighed a decade. The street seemed noisier than ever, filled with voices that cut through me. I walked aimlessly until I ended up in front of the cemetery. The gate was open, so I entered. The air smelled of earth and fading flowers. I stopped in front of Elijah's grave. The marble was still clean, the wreaths drying in the sun. I rested my hand on the headstone. "Why, Elijah?" I whispered. "Why did you lie to me?" There was no answer, only the sound of the wind rustling through the cypress leaves. I looked around, searching for strength in a landscape of the dead, and I found it within myself. "If you wanted to keep secrets," I said to the marble through clenched teeth, "I will unearth them one by one, and when I have them all, I promise you no one will ever use your silence to destroy me again." Arriving home, I found Vanessa waiting for me at the door. Her presence took me by surprise. "Where were you?" she asked in a tone that was half sweet, half controlling. "Taking a walk," I replied without emotion. "Marcus is worried. He hasn't slept since the funeral." "Neither have I," she observed me with that look that seemed to want to pierce my soul. "Did you find anything?" she asked abruptly. "What are you referring to?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "I don't know. Sometimes people hold on to memories. Elijah had many." I didn't answer. Her words were carefully measured, but her intention was clear. She knew I had opened the box. "You know, Vanessa," I said softly, "there are things you think you know about people, but time always has a strange way of showing us what we didn't want to see." She smiled. "That's true, Celeste. Time reveals everything." "Yes," I added, "even lies." Her smile faltered for a second, and I knew with absolute certainty that I had hit my mark. That night I couldn't stop looking at the photo. Elijah, Serena, and the little girl. I studied the little girl's features again. The shape of her chin, the curve of her eyebrows, the defiant look in her eyes. They were the same ones I had seen in Vanessa, the same sparkle, the same shadow. My heart leaped. I brought my hands to my face, horrified. Couldn't be, but it was. Everything fell into place. The letter, the key, Vanessa's attitude, her presence in Marcus' life. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't fate. It was a plan. A plan that had started long before I even knew who she was. I closed my eyes and prayed, not for forgiveness but for clarity, because something told me that what I was about to discover would not only change my life, but could cost it. The mind has a curious way of protecting itself. When something hurts too much, it buries it under layers of routine. That morning I tried to pretend everything was normal. I made coffee, opened the windows, put on soft music. But there was no way to silence the truth, which was pounding inside me like a broken clock. The photo was on the table, staring at me. That 3-year-old girl with Vanessa's eyes was looking at me from the past. I didn't need a DNA test to know. I knew the instant I looked at her. Vanessa was Serena Harper's daughter, and Elijah, my husband, was her father. I sat still for a long time, letting the truth sink in. 40 years of marriage, and I still had secrets left to discover. I left the house without telling anyone where I was going. I took a taxi to the old neighborhood where my friend Loretta lived, a woman who had known everyone in the area for more than 40 years. She had been my confidant in difficult times, so I knew if anyone could help me connect the dots, it was her. Loretta greeted me in her robe, her gray hair tied up, and a look of concern on her face. "Celeste, goodness, you look pale. What happened?" I sat on her sofa and told her everything, from the letter in the casket to the photo, including the will and the visit to the lawyer. She listened without interrupting, her hands clasped tightly over her knees. When I finished, she looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. "Serena Harper," she repeated. "Of course I remember her. Did you know her?" I asked, feeling my heart race. "She lived 2 streets down from your house many years ago. She was a pretty woman, very private. And Elijah helped her. At least that's what he said. She was a seamstress. Your husband would bring her orders from his office. But there were rumors." My throat tightened. What kind of rumors? That she had a daughter and that the father was, well, you know who. Elijah. Loretta lowered her gaze. "I never confirmed it, but they moved away suddenly. People said he bought her a house on the other side of town." I remained silent. The words hung in the air like knives. Serena, the daughter, the house. It all fit together. Upon returning home, Vanessa was waiting for me. I don't know how she did it, but she always appeared right when I least wanted her nearby. She was in the garden, watering the plants with a strained smile. "What a lovely morning, isn't it, Celeste?" she said without looking at me. "Depends on who you ask." She put down the watering can, dried her hands, and looked at me with a calm, almost too calm expression. "Is something wrong?" "Only that I was thinking about your mother." The expression on her face changed for just a split second, but it was enough. A shadow flickered in her eyes. "My mother?" she asked softly. "Yes, Serena Harper." The smile vanished completely. The silence grew thick. I could hear the leaves of the lemon tree falling one by one. "So you know now," she finally said. "You didn't intend to hide it forever, did you?" She didn't answer. "Only until I had finished what I came to do." Her tone was cold, measured, but charged with something much deeper. Resentment. "Your father," she began to say. "My father was a coward. He abandoned my mother when she needed him most. She got sick. She died penniless. And meanwhile, you and your son were living in luxury, surrounded by parties and trips. Do you know what it's like to watch your mother sew until her fingers bled just to pay the rent, while the man who gave you life was toasting at a restaurant with his legal wife?" I couldn't answer. My lips trembled as she continued, each word a lash. "That's why I approached Marcus. That's why I accepted his love. Not for him, but for justice." "Justice?" I whispered. "Or revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing." I felt a pang in my chest, but not of guilt, it was rage. Rage at Elijah for his silence, for the way his sin had taken root inside my own house. But above all, rage because Vanessa had used my son, my grandson, my entire family as an instrument of her revenge. "What was it you put in the casket?" I asked. She smiled ironically. "A memory." "What kind of memory?" "A photograph of my mother, so that wherever he is, he never forgets who he destroyed." I was speechless. The clarity of her hatred was more terrifying than any threat. There were no tears, no trembling, only a bitter edge to her face. "And what do you expect now?" I asked her. "Nothing from you. I've already gotten what I wanted." "What?" "To see him dead and to see you confused." That night I locked myself in my room. I was afraid, not just of her but of myself, of what a wounded woman was capable of doing. Because even though her story moved me, I couldn't forgive her for what she was doing to Marcus. He was innocent. He was a blind man raised among false pretenses. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back had a pale face, tired eyes, but a new light in them. A determination I didn't remember ever feeling. I took the journal Elijah kept in his desk drawer. I had seen it 1,000 times but never. I opened it. This time I actually did. Nestled between the pages, I discovered a note written in faded ink. It read, "If Vanessa ever returns, do not confront her with hatred. She's unaware of the complete truth. Serena didn't die because I abandoned her. She died because of what she was hiding." A shiver ran down my spine. I reread the words, completely incredulous. What was he trying to say? What secrets had Serena been keeping? And why did Elijah believe his daughter would reappear? I realized that crucial pieces of this complex puzzle were still missing, and that Vanessa wasn't the only one harboring secrets. A disturbing mix of hatred and fear began to brew within me, fueled by an overwhelming need to uncover the truth. I couldn't restrain myself any longer. When a woman discovers her entire life has been built upon a foundation of lies, she no longer seeks comfort or solace. She becomes consumed by the relentless pursuit of truth. And I had a strong premonition that the truth still had many more layers to reveal to me. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I was haunted by a disturbing vision. Elijah's face and Vanessa's cold, calculating gaze intermingling in the same unsettling dream. The man I had loved for 40 long years had knowingly brought his own punishment into our home, skillfully disguised in a cloak of beauty, false sweetness, and carefully measured words. And I, the fool that I was, had welcomed her with open arms. But no more. Something profound had awakened within me. A voice I didn't recognize, firm and unwavering, tirelessly repeating, "This time, you will be in control." I brewed a pot of coffee at the crack of dawn and patiently waited. I knew that Marcus would stop by to see me before heading off to work, as he did every Monday morning. I desperately needed to see him. I needed to look deeply into his eyes and truly recognize the extent of the damage that had already been inflicted upon him, and the immense pain that was yet to come. When he finally arrived, he embraced me warmly. He didn't seem like the grown man he was, but rather a lost and vulnerable child seeking comfort and reassurance. He had dark circles under his eyes, slumped shoulders, and a voice that was barely audible. "I just don't understand what's going on with Vanessa, Mom. Ever since Dad passed away, she's been different, distant. Maybe she just needs time," I replied cautiously, carefully measuring my words. "We all process grief in our own unique ways," he sighed heavily. "Last night, I overheard her talking in her sleep. She was saying some really strange things. Names that I don't even recognize." "What kind of names?" "Serena, Elijah, and something about what he owes me." My heart skipped a beat, but I managed to conceal my reaction. "It's probably just dreams, stress." I hugged him tightly and gently stroked his head, just like I used to do when he was a child, but deep down, I knew that I couldn't keep everything hidden from him. Not yet. Not until I had undeniable proof. That morning, I made the most difficult decision of my entire life, to play the same deceptive game as Vanessa, to skillfully disguise the truth, to act with an outward sense of calmness, all while the fire of suspicion and anger relentlessly grew beneath the surface. If she wanted a war, she would certainly have one, but it would be fought entirely on my terms. I decided to start with something seemingly simple, inviting them both to dinner over the upcoming weekend. I told them that I wanted to express my sincere gratitude for their support and companionship during these incredibly difficult days. Vanessa immediately accepted the invitation, feigning sympathy and concern. "Of course, Celeste. It will be nice to share a family meal together again." But her forced smile didn't fool me for even a second. Behind that carefully constructed facade, I detected a dark glint, a sense of satisfaction that sent shivers down my spine. But I refused to show it. I simply looked at her with the same knowing smile that grandmothers often use when they already possess all the essential information, and are merely waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. The days leading up to the dinner were meticulously dedicated to careful planning. I discreetly contacted Attorney Lawson and requested that he come to the house that evening, bringing with him the documents I had discovered in the bank, as well as a certified copy of the original will. I also asked him for an additional favor, to bring along a qualified handwriting expert. I didn't offer any explanation as to why. I simply stated, "Trust me, attorney. What you are about to witness is something you won't soon forget." And he, without fully comprehending the situation, agreed to my request. On the evening of the dinner, I meticulously set the table with ritualistic precision. The pristine white china, the gleaming silver cutlery, the crystal glasses that Elijah reserved only for the most special occasions. Every single detail served a purpose. Every gesture carried a hidden meaning. When the clock struck 8, I heard the distinct sound of the doorbell ringing. Vanessa entered, arm in arm with Marcus, gracefully dressed in an elegant black gown. She looked every bit the grieving widow from a classic novel. "What a warm and inviting home you have, Celeste," she said as she removed her coat. "Thank you, dear," I replied sweetly. "I'm so glad to see you in good spirits." We all sat down at the dinner table. The atmosphere, while outwardly cordial, was undeniably charged with tension. Marcus attempted to keep the conversation light and cheerful, but Vanessa continuously interrupted him with carefully calculated phrases, filled with subtle innuendos cleverly disguised as genuine affection. I watched her in complete silence, carefully noting how her eyes darted around the room, toward the drawers, toward the corners, as if she was searching for something specific. While I was pouring the wine, I sensed that the moment had finally arrived. "Marcus, before we continue," I said calmly, "I need to tell you something." He looked at me with concern etched on his face. "What is it, Mom?" "I simply want to thank you for being such a noble and devoted son. Not all men possess the strength to confront what you are about to discover." Vanessa abruptly placed her wine glass back down on the table. "What does that even mean?" she asked, her tone a mixture of alarm and defiance. I stared directly at her without blinking. "It means that the truth always finds its way into the light, even if you attempt to bury it with a dead man." Marcus tensed up. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Your father's son and the secrets he kept hidden before he died." Vanessa abruptly stood up from the table. "This is absurd," she exclaimed. "Don't start telling stories now, Celeste." "Stories?" I replied with a subtle smile. "Or perhaps truths that you would prefer to keep buried." The silence in the room was absolute. Then, calmly and deliberately, I retrieved the folder from the bank out of a nearby drawer and placed it on the table. "You recognize this key, don't you?" I asked her pointedly. She visibly paled. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "It was the key that you placed in the casket, the very same key that opened this box." Marcus looked at me, completely bewildered. "What key, Vanessa?" She remained silent. "In that box," I continued, "I found a will. A will where your father leaves everything to a woman named Serena Harper." Marcus froze. "Who is that woman?" "Your wife could probably answer that question better than I can," I said, looking directly at Vanessa. Vanessa clenched her fists tightly. "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing that you don't already know," I whispered. She took a step backward, and at that moment, I knew that I had struck a nerve. "No, daughter," I said. "This is the truth." "What truth?" "My mother died years ago. She has absolutely nothing to do with any of this." "Oh, really?" I opened the envelope and carefully removed the photograph. "Then explain this." The photograph fluttered onto the table. Marcus picked it up with trembling hands. "What is this?" "Your father and Serena and the little girl you see there?" My voice broke with emotion. "That is Vanessa." He looked at his wife, who was pale and speechless. "Is that true?" he asked her, his voice barely a whisper. Vanessa, finally cornered, allowed her carefully constructed mask to drop. Her voice changed, becoming cold and hard. "Yes, it's true," she said coldly. "And I don't regret a single thing." Marcus stood up, completely incredulous. "You lied to me. Your father ruined my mother's life." I simply returned the favor. Her shocking confession fell like a thunderclap. I watched the scene unfold in silence. Inside, a part of me wept bitterly, but another part, older and stronger, smiled, knowing that the poison had finally been brought to the surface. The night following the dinner was the longest and most agonizing of my life. The silence within the house weighed heavily upon me, as if the walls themselves had absorbed all the screams, all the tears, and all the secrets that had been revealed. Marcus had left without saying a single word. Vanessa, after her explosive confession, had stormed out of the house, leaving behind a bitter scent, a disturbing mix of expensive perfume and cold, calculated revenge. I remained alone, staring at the empty dinner table. The photograph was still there, lying next to the half-empty glasses. The portrait of my husband with Serena and that little child seemed to mingle with the reflection of the spilled red wine, as if the past was bleeding uncontrollably into the present. I knew that I wouldn't be able to sleep. Not yet. I had to understand. I had to know why Elijah had allowed all of this to happen. I went up to his study. That place had always been his sanctuary, his refuge. The books were perfectly aligned on the shelves, his desk was meticulously polished, and the lingering scent of ink and wood filled the air. I opened the drawers, searching for something more than just answers. And then I found it, the black notebook, the very same journal I had seen so many times without ever daring to read it. Now there was nothing left to lose. I sat down in his chair and opened the journal. On the first page his firm handwriting read, "If you are reading this, Celeste, it means that I am gone. Please forgive me for the secrets I kept hidden. But there are some truths that can destroy before they can save. The story that you think you know is neither mine nor yours." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I turned the pages with trembling hands, and then I saw it. The name that had haunted me for so long, Serena Harper.
I met Serena in 1979.
It wasn't love. It was guilt. She worked cleaning my office. One night after a party, I made the worst mistake of my life. I left her alone, and something terrible happened to her. I didn't know what it was until years later. I brought a hand to my mouth, gasping for air. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I continued. When I learned that she had a daughter, I wanted to take responsibility, but Serena never accepted my help. She told me that she would rather die than allow me to be a part of her life. I insisted. I sent her money in secret, but she disappeared. Years later, I found out that she had died. But something about that story never felt right to me. I turned the page. Someone told me that Serena hadn't actually died, that she had changed her identity and that the girl was raised by others, that the Harper surname was an invention, that everything was meticulously planned to get close to me, not to flee from me. My heart was beating so rapidly that I could barely read the words on the page. Then I reached the last entry. If Vanessa ever appears, don't hate her, but don't trust her either. Behind her, there is someone else. Someone who knows my mistakes better than I do myself. If anything happens to me, look for the man with the black ring. He will know the truth. I snapped the journal shut. The air in the room became thick and heavy. The man with the black ring. That phrase echoed in my head over and over again. Who was he? And why was Elijah so afraid of his appearance? I spent the next few hours meticulously looking through old photos, documents, and invoices. And then I saw it. In a photograph from a bank event, Elijah was posing with several partners. To the right, there was a man with a mustache and a distinctive dark ring on his right hand. His gaze sent chills down my spine. On the back of the photo in Elijah's handwriting was a name, Harold Linton. I remembered Elijah mentioning him from time to time, but always in an evasive manner. He said that he had been his friend, his partner in some business deals, but I had never actually seen him at our home. And now, 30 years later, his name had resurfaced like a ghost from the past. The next morning I called Attorney Lawson. Attorney, does the name Harold Linton ring a bell? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Yes, he was a business partner of your husband's many years ago. Is he still alive? As far as I know, yes. But he hesitated slightly. You shouldn't approach him, Miss Thacker. Why do you say that? That man is not trustworthy. After Elijah severed all ties with him, there were rumors, shady dealings, extortion, even threats. My skin prickled with fear. Where does he live? I asked. On the outskirts of town, near the old warehouse where Elijah used to store his things. But please don't go there alone. I hung up the phone without answering. I knew that I would go anyway. That afternoon, I took the bus to the industrial district. The warehouse was still there, old, rusty, and overgrown with weeds. The wind carried dust and scraps of paper. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding like a drum. No one answered. I knocked again, louder this time. Harold Linton, I called out. The door slowly creaked open, and there he stood, an older man with white hair and a shiny black ring on his hand. His gaze was hard and unyielding, but not surprised. So you've finally come, he said in a raspy voice. Elijah knew that you would one day. I froze. Who are you? I asked. I am the one who knows why your husband died. The floor seemed to move beneath my feet. He died? I stammered. Elijah had a heart attack. The man let out a bitter laugh. Heart attack? No, Mrs. Thacker. What are you saying? I'm saying that your husband was poisoned. My breath hitched in my throat. By whom? By the same person that you think loved him. Vanessa? I asked. He shook his head. No, by someone who used her. Who? A woman named Serena. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. That can't be. Serena is dead, right? His smile was chilling. Are you so sure? My world came crashing down around me. The air filled with echoes, with voices from the past, with the haunting image of that old photograph. Serena, the woman that I thought was dead, was alive. And if she was, what role did she play in all of this? I returned home, trembling uncontrollably. I turned on all the lights. Even though it was the middle of the day, I couldn't shake the image of that man's gaze, his black ring, the words that he had spoken. Your husband was poisoned. And then I remembered something. One night before he died, Elijah had complained about a bitter taste in the tea that Vanessa had prepared for him. She had been taking care of him those days because I was sick. And he, between coughs, had said, "It doesn't taste the same, but it doesn't matter. It's made with love." I closed my eyes and brought my hands to my mouth, stifling a sob. The truth was revealed before me. Monstrous and impossible to deny. Elijah had been poisoned, and I had unknowingly lived under the same roof as his killer. But if Harold was right, Vanessa hadn't acted alone. Someone else was pulling her strings from the shadows. Serena was alive, still seeking one last act of revenge. My heart was beating so hard that I thought it would burst from my chest. And in that moment I knew that what was coming wasn't the end. It was the real beginning. There are silences that scream. That night mine was deafening. I walked through the house with the journal in my hand, carefully reviewing every word, every trembling stroke of Elijah's handwriting. If anything happens to me, look for the man with the black ring. I had already done that. And what Harold Linton had told me kept repeating in my head. Your husband was poisoned not by her but by someone who used her. What if everything that I thought I knew was just the surface? What if Vanessa had also been a pawn in a much bigger game? I sat in the darkness in front of the wedding portrait that still hung in the living room. Elijah was smiling, holding my hand. I had looked at him with the faith that only women who truly believe in eternity possess. Now, I knew that eternity didn't exist. Only the truths that no one wanted to see remained. The next morning I received a call. It was Harold. His voice sounded grave, urgent. I found her, he said bluntly. Serena. What are you saying? She's alive and she wants to see you. The ground seemed to open up beneath my feet. Where? At the Old Bayview Hotel tonight, but I warn you, don't go alone. Don't trust anyone. He hung up before I could even answer. The silence that followed was like a knife twisting in my gut. As evening fell, I asked Marcus to come over. He had to know everything. I showed him the journal, the will, the photograph, and told him everything that Harold had said. He listened without interrupting, pale and incredulous. Mom, he whispered at the end. Are you sure that they aren't manipulating you? I am, I replied firmly. But I won't stand by and do nothing. I saw the fear in his eyes. Let me come with you. No, son. If what I fear is true, I want you to stay away from this. I stroked his face. Promise me that no matter what happens, you won't see Vanessa again. He nodded, although there was a great deal of pain in his eyes. I knew that promise would break his heart. I arrived at the hotel at 9 o'clock that night. The place seemed frozen in time. The walls were damp, the lights flickered, and there was a lingering smell of confinement and dust. The receptionist, an elderly man, pointed me toward room 204. My footsteps echoed down the empty hallway. Every creak of the floor was a warning, every shadow a potential threat. I knocked on the door. A voice from inside said, "Come in, Celeste. I was expecting you." I entered the room. It was dimly lit by an old lamp. By the window, a woman sat with her back to me. She had long white hair and a dark shawl draped over her shoulders. When she turned around, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was Serena, older and more fragile, but undeniably alive. Her eyes held the same familiar sparkle as in the photograph. "So it's you," I said, barely able to breathe. "Yes." Her voice was soft but firm. "And you are the wife, the widow," I corrected. We looked at each other in silence. For a moment, only the weight of the decades that separated us existed, along with the shadow of a dead man between us. "Your husband was a coward," she said bluntly. "And you a shadow that never left," I replied. She smiled sadly. "Don't blame me, Celeste. He destroyed my life and my son's life too. And yours. What did you gain from all of this?" "Justice," she whispered. "You call poisoning a man and using your own daughter to do it justice?" Serena lowered her gaze. "It wasn't me." "What?" "It wasn't me who killed him." Her confession paralyzed me. "Then who?" The door burst open. Vanessa entered, her eyes filled with tears and a pistol clutched tightly in her hand. "Me!" she screamed. "It was me, Mom." The echo of her voice filled the room. Serena stood up, trembling. "Vanessa, no." "Yes," she sobbed. "You made me do it. You made me hate him. You made me believe that he had ruined your life. But you were the one who destroyed him first." Serena tried to approach her. "Daughter, don't you understand? Elijah threatened to take you away from me. I did it out of fear." "Lies," Vanessa screamed. "You always lie." The trembling of her hands was dangerous. "Put the gun down," I said, taking a step forward. "Don't come near me," she yelled. "You're not innocent either. You lived his lie." For an instant I thought that she would shoot, but instead her body collapsed. She fell to her knees, crying and screaming her mother's name. Serena ran to her, embracing her tightly. I stood watching that broken scene, mother and daughter consumed by tears and guilt. Everything that hatred had built was crumbling before me. Minutes later, the police arrived. Someone had called, probably Harold. They took Vanessa away without any resistance. Serena looked at me before they handcuffed her too. "Don't hate her, Celeste. It's my fault. It's all three of us," I told her. Because sin is committed not only by the one who wounds, but also by the one who remains silent. On the way back home, the dawn found me sitting on the porch. The cool wind hit my face. For the first time in months, I breathed without fear. I had lost a husband, a daughter-in-law, and almost a son. But I had gained something even more valuable, the truth. And the truth, even if it hurts deeply, ultimately sets you free. I took Elijah's journal one last time. On the last page I wrote, "Sometimes justice comes not with screams, but with silence, and forgiveness is not for the one who asks for it, but for the one who no longer wants to carry the crushing weight of hatred." I closed the notebook. The sun began to rise, painting the walls of the house with gold, and I felt that finally, after so much pain, I could rest. 6 months have passed since that night at the hotel. Sometimes I still wake up to the sound of Vanessa's scream echoing in my ears. Sometimes I think that I can hear the shot that never went off because I contained it with my voice, with my presence, with the only thing that I could still offer, my compassion. Since then, time has continued to move forward, but my life has been changed forever. The garden has bloomed again, though not in the same way. The wind smells different, and every corner of the house holds an echo of what once was. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't look at Elijah's portrait and wonder if, in some corner of the afterlife, he watches me, filled with remorse and regret. I have learned that truth doesn't arrive when we seek it out, but when we are truly prepared to bear it. And I unknowingly had spent my entire life preparing for that very moment. Vanessa was sentenced to 20 years in prison, not for murder, as the forensic report never definitively proved that the poisoning was fatal, but for fraud, identity theft, and document manipulation. Serena, her mother, was also charged, although due to her advanced age and fragile health condition, she is currently under house arrest. Marcus, my son, was never the same after that. The day that the police took his wife away, He fell to his knees in front of me. "I don't understand, Mom," he said, his voice broken with grief. "Why? Why all of this?" I hugged him tightly, but I didn't know what to say because, deep down, I don't fully understand it either. Hatred is a silent inheritance. It is transmitted without words, like a dark shadow passing from one generation to the next. And sometimes when you don't stop it in time, it ends up devouring everything that it touches. Marcus decided to leave the city. He calls me once a week, but his voice sounds distant and tired. I don't blame him. His soul is shattered, and every word that I speak reminds him of the pain that he has tried so desperately to bury. I also thought about leaving, about abandoning this house, this neighborhood, this country if necessary. But then I understood that fleeing is not healing. Healing is staying, facing the echoes of the past, and learning to live with them. So I stayed. I have dedicated my days to restoring the small things that used to bring me peace. Painting the walls, caring for my plants, writing. I have filled entire notebooks with my story. Not for myself, but for those who come after me. I want any woman like me, a wife, a mother, a grandmother who feels her life crumbling because of a betrayal, to be able to read my words and know that survival is indeed possible. 2 weeks ago I received a letter. It was from Attorney Lawson. Inside was a yellowed envelope sealed with Elijah's handwriting. My heart leaped with anticipation. It read, "Celeste, if this letter reaches you, it is because the truth has finally come to light. Don't seek to forgive me, just try to understand me. I never loved Serena as I loved you. It was a mistake, one that I dragged with me throughout my entire life. But when I found out that I had a daughter, I wanted to help, even if it had to be in secret. I never imagined that my attempt at redemption would ultimately destroy us all. If there is anything after death, I hope to see you there so that I can tell you with my own lips what my cowardice prevented me from saying in life. I loved you always, Elijah." I read that letter over and over again until it was completely soaked with my tears. I didn't forgive him in that instant, but I understood something that set me free. Love doesn't always save, but forgiveness. Forgiving him wasn't about condoning his actions. It was about releasing the burden that was weighing me down, threatening to drown me. These days, as evening approaches, I often go out onto the porch, wrap a blanket around myself, and gaze out at the horizon. The sky transforms into that familiar blend of orange and violet, the very colors Elijah adored. Even though I know he's gone, I sometimes find myself talking to him in a hushed tone. I tell him about the garden, about the rose bushes that have bloomed once more, about the birds building nests in the old lemon tree. I tell him that I miss him dearly, but that I no longer need him in order to simply exist. The first time I was able to utter those words without feeling a pang of guilt, I knew that I had finally begun to truly heal. My thoughts also drift to Vanessa, to the raw anger that burned in her eyes the last time I saw her. I don't harbor any hatred towards her. I understand that her story was largely written for her, long before she had any real agency. She was a child of abandonment, of deep-seated resentment, of stifling silence. And those can be terribly cruel influences. I sent a letter to the prison, not to berate her or assign blame, but to tell her that while hatred can be passed down through generations, it can also be actively stopped. I wrote to her, "You were raised in the shadows, Vanessa, but you still have the power to learn to see the light. Not my light, nor even your mother's light, but your own unique light. When you finally find it, you'll understand that you weren't put on this earth to destroy, but to heal the wounds that the past inflicted upon you." I honestly don't know if she ever read it. I have no idea if she will ever respond, but I needed to write it because there are certain wounds that only carefully chosen words can begin to mend. Recently, the lawyer paid me another visit. He brought with him yet another safety deposit box registered under Elijah's name. I was initially hesitant to open it. I was afraid of potentially reigniting the cycle of pain and grief, but I eventually decided to proceed. Inside I found 3 items. A photograph of the 3 of them, Elijah, Serena, and a young Vanessa as a little girl. A small delicate silver cross. And a handwritten note that read, "If you're reading this, it means that everything has finally come to light. Thank you for taking care of everyone, especially those who didn't necessarily deserve it. Please forgive my silence. Now you can finally live your life without me." For the first time since everything happened, I didn't cry. I simply smiled, feeling a strange and unfamiliar sense of peace washing over me. It was as if Elijah's spirit had finally released its hold on my hand, allowing me to move forward. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years. I dreamed of him, not on his deathbed, not as the man who had deceived me, but as the carefree young man who swept me up and took me dancing in the rain the day he asked me to marry him. In the dream, he looked directly at me and said, "That's it, Celeste. Everything has been paid for in full." I woke up with tears streaming down my face, but also with a profound sense of relief. The price of uncovering the truth had undoubtedly been steep. I lost my husband, my son, and my daughter-in-law along the way. But I gained something that I had thought was completely unattainable for decades. My freedom. The freedom to be authentically me, without the constant fear, without putting on false appearances, without having to maintain a web of lies. The freedom to look back on the past without bitterness clouding my vision, and to look ahead to the future without any burdensome expectations weighing me down. The freedom to simply live my life to the fullest. I am Celeste Thacker, and this was my story.